Okay, great.
And my sister Margaret.
Sorry, what do you mean simple?
All right, let's get started. Let's just
It's your badge, and there's cooler for cold drinks. I'll have a,
Thank you.
if you want one.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Whoa, this is a hot mic. Thank you very much for coming to the April Town Hall meeting for Congressman Khanna. Very nice to see you here. As you know, we're trying to rotate these around the congressional districts, so this month it's Newark. To get us started, I think the mayor is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Isn't that correct? Flag's over there.
Thank you very much. If you'd all please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
You want to say, maybe say a few words?
Oh, sure. Sure.
Is the mic working?
How do you turn down? Should have turned down the mic.
He's got it.
Well, welcome to Newark, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure that you are all here too. I want to thank you for attending, and it's a real honor for Newark to host Congressman Khanna at one of his town hall meetings. I think this is one of the very first town hall meetings, so we're doubly pleased that Ro is here today, and we appreciate all the good work that he does in Washington, and we just say just keep it up, and we look forward to your remarks today. So thank you. Thank you, Ro. Thank you.
Chris, actually, I'll do it. Well, thank you, Mayor Nagy. Thank you for being here. A real honor to have you get us started. And I just want to recognize, of course, some of the other elected officials, Mike Hannon, our city council member in Newark. Good friend, Nancy Thomas, who's the Newark Unified School District. Nice to see you, Nancy. And, of course, our officers, Ryan Johnson and Daniel Carey from the Newark Police. Thank you. Yeah.
So here's the way we run these. Congressman will speak for a few minutes on the latest news in Washington, but we try to reserve at least a full hour of this for your questions and answers. And so we have two roving people with microphones. We have three? Oh, sweet. So we have our Director of Constituent Services, Tom Pike, back there with one microphone. Our newest hire, Field Rep Nandini Narayan, with a microphone. And we have Vanessa over here with the third microphone. So once we get into Q&A, just try to attract the attention of one of those people, and they will pick you, and then you get to ask your question. And we'll do that for like an hour. All right? So, Congressman Khanna, what's up?
Thank you so much for taking time on a Sunday to come out. I always love these town halls. As Chris mentioned, we're going to be doing one a month in different cities, and it's great to be back home in Newark. I live in Fremont, right on Mission Boulevard. Don't hold that against me for those that are in New York, but it's great to be here, and most of the time is going to be questions and answers. But let me give just a little bit of overview. Congress, as you know, has been on recess for the last 2 weeks. I was appalled that they didn't call us back during the Syria strikes. You'll remember that we've been on recess since the president made that decision without the authorization of Congress. Leader Pelosi called on the president to call Congress back. You think Congress really ought to be voting on issues of war and peace? That's partly what you pay us to do. And they didn't call us back. They have not had Congress in session. I was opposed to the missile strikes. We can get into why. I'd love to hear your view. But at the very least, whatever one's view, They should have had a debate in Congress on the issue. We're now headed back, finally, on Tuesday, and we're going to be in a situation where we still don't know whether there's going to be government funded. They're talking about a government shutdown if they don't have the votes to keep government funded. Now, I'll tell you something, the Democrats are not going to give them votes to cut Meals on Wheels or to cut weatherization programs. I mean, do you understand that sometimes, I know all of you, see Tony, I'm sure Tony understands that the weatherization program, these aren't technical line items in a budget. These are about our values. I mean, the weatherization program allows seniors, many of them in our community, to get their furnaces fixed in the winters or their utilities paid so they don't go without heat. The Meals on Wheels program is helping seniors get meals not just so that they have nutrition, but so that someone is checking in on them. Many times they don't have people who they can rely on. These are the programs the president is talking about zeroing out in his current budget. And the amount that we spend on these programs is so minuscule compared to the $54 billion defense increase that he wants that I could say certainly no one in California, but I don't think any Democrat is going to go vote for those type of budget cuts. So it's up to all of us to make it clear that we're not going to tolerate those cuts, and then to see that the Republicans will do something at least reasonable and not having those atrocious cuts so we can continue to fund our government and the government doesn't come to a halt. The third thing, and I'll open it up to questions. I'm looking there more because we're also on live feed, so I apologize if my back is to this audience. I just want folks who are following us online to be able to hear. The third thing that I wanted to discuss before opening it up for your questions is the health care bill. I want to thank all of you for being active, having your voices heard, many of you, on that issue. It was not Congress that defeated that bill. It was really citizen activists around this country who shared their stories about what losing the Affordable Care Act coverage would mean to them and their families. Well, believe it or not, how many of you have read that the Republicans are planning to introduce yet another attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act? I mean, it's like Groundhog's Day. I often joke about Congress. I was telling my family this. I said, you know, with Democrats, we go in quietly. Most of us know, unfortunately, we're going to vote no on the latest effort of repealing an environmental regulation or taking away people's privacy on the internet. I mean, they come up with these crazier ideas every time, and we go quietly and vote no. And then you see almost like a swarm of paparazzi around members of Congress. And I first said, why are they talking to them? And then you realize they're talking to members of the Freedom Caucus. They're 20, 25, and you have 50 reporters around them. And these are the ones who are really holding the entire Congress hostage. And here is what they are likely going to propose. I mean, we haven't read the bill. We haven't seen the bill. You know, they made all this criticism, if you remember, with the Affordable Care Act, but that bill went through 2 committees and was debated for a year. Here they're trying to introduce a bill to be voted on Wednesday, and as your representative, I haven't even seen what the bill is other than press reports. But from what we're reading, here's what they want to do. Now, I kid you not, this is the old version of their bill would have taken 24 million Americans off of health insurance by getting rid of the Affordable Care Act. But that wasn't good enough for the Freedom Caucus. So the Freedom Caucus has said, well, what we really want to do is to allow states to opt out of covering people with pre-existing conditions. That's their bill. So if you have a pre-existing condition, if someone in your family has diabetes or someone has cancer, you no longer can buy that insurance if your state opts out of it. Now, what they say they would do because it's important to get all the facts. I mean, we don't have to spin we just need to tell people the facts, exactly what they're going to do. So they would have a waiver for the state, and they would create these high-risk pools, meaning the only people who would be eligible to buy into this high-risk pool would be people with pre-existing conditions. Now, the Republicans claim to know about economics, but anyone can tell you what's going to happen if only people who were sick are buying health care insurance in a high-risk pool. Guess how expensive their health insurance is going to be? Well, we've tried this. We know in Colorado or in other states that have had high-risk pools, they don't work for the obvious reason that no insurance company or insurance is going to be able to cover folks who are already, all by definition, have some health issues. And so the premiums for them have been 4 to 5 times as high. When they have gotten coverage, they have had basically sham coverage, which hasn't covered the actual expenses because it's just not economically feasible. This is the plan that they're going to propose. They're taking a plan that was already bad, that was going to deprive 24 million people of insurance, and now actually is going to deprive even people of pre-existing conditions with insurance, and they're cloaking it in, well, the states have the choice to do what they want. But we know that economically it makes no sense. Now, let me tell you, because people keep saying, well, the Democrats, they're just negative, they don't have a positive vision. Let me tell you a positive compromise vision. I'm for Medicare for all, single-payer system, but even if the president, I appreciate that, and John Conyers has been terrific. He's been a leader on that issue along with a number of others. But in the House, John Conyers has sponsored that bill. I think we're up to almost 100 co-sponsors in the Democratic caucus around a single-payer vision. And by the way, Donald Trump, in his book in 2000, wrote that he was for a single-payer system. He's taken about every position possible, but he actually said that Canadians live longer and healthier lives than Americans at less cost, and the reason they do it is because they have a single-payer system. You can look it up on Google if you don't believe me, is quoted. But even if we can't get a single-payer system, here's my view. I mean, I think we should, and hopefully when we have a Democratic president and Democratic Congress, we will. But people keep saying, well, Ro, are you willing to compromise? What is the Democrats' vision of compromising? Because we all know that premiums have gone up, right, in this country. We know that we have to do something for costs. So here's my view. The Republicans keep talking about these exchanges and how these exchanges, insurance companies are leaving these exchanges. How many people have heard their arguments that, oh, the insurance companies aren't going to cover them, premiums are going up? Here's my view, which will fix this immediately. If you have an exchange which has only one insurance company, a monopoly, then have a public option. Then have a public option there, because that will force competition. If we offer that public option, I guarantee you more insurance companies will come because they're not going to want to compete with the public option. So in any state, any exchange where you have only one monopolist, because the Republicans are all about choice. So if you have only one choice, then have a public option. Don't do it even in places that have multiple insurance companies if you want to compromise. But the point is the Republicans just are not serious, because that's a very reasonable compromise if they would go for it. It's not that the Democrats are opposed to doing something that's going to help people. It's that the Republicans don't have a view in the Congress of actually expanding health care or reducing premiums, which is the goal. I'm getting timed out, so now let's open it up to questions.
So I think one, right? Is that right? Is that the one? Or there are two? Looks like one. Then in that case, Congressman, I'm going to suggest we go over here on this disc. That way you can see most of your and see you as well. Now, staffers, did you decide who goes first? Vanessa's going first?
I learned
Here's
my lesson. Ladies first.
Congressman, my name is Gokul. I moved to this country 8 years back for my graduate studies at Stanford. We started this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I would like to do that as well, but I have to wait 70 years for my green card because I was born in the wrong country. And until then, I'm unable to start my own business, easily switch jobs. I'm really proud of having you as my congressman for a couple of reasons. One, you had co-sponsored the bill HR 392, the Fairness for High Skilled Immigrants Act, which removes this discriminatory per-country quota on employment-based green cards. And number two, you actually reach out to the other side of the aisle and work with representatives in the Republican Party. For example, you met Hal Rogers in Kentucky. You wanted to bring the prosperity of Silicon Valley to other parts of the country, and also with Leader McCarthy on bringing tech jobs, tech education for veterans. I really appreciate that. I wanted to request you to reach out to the leadership and the other party, and I request for your leadership to get this bill done, which will not only help our district, but will also help folks who are stuck in this backlog in other parts of the country and help them start tech businesses and bring the prosperity of Silicon Valley to other parts of the country.
I appreciate that, Gokul, and thank you for sharing your story. The bill that Gokul mentioned is a common sense bill, which says that if you have gone to school or worked in this country and stayed here and contributing for 7 to 8 years, we ought to have a path to giving those folks a green card. And the reason is simple, because I don't want them going to China and India or Brazil and creating jobs there. I want them creating jobs in the United States. It's common sense. Now, I have said that we need to reform the underpaying of H-1B visas so that we're not underpaying foreign workers and depressing market wages. But there is absolutely no rationale for having people in an H-1B or immigrant status being underpaid and not giving them a green card to contribute to this economy. We know that immigrants contribute about $1.5 trillion to the U.S. economy. They contribute actually more per capita than those of us like me who were born in the United States. We've always been a country that recognizes immigrant contributions. Let me just make one other point before we'll get as many questions in. I'm here for longer than an hour if you're going to be here. But the point about bipartisanship and reaching across the aisle, I have had a very, very progressive record, but I'm not. When I went to Congress, I said I would put my country above party. And if you look at my votes, I'm probably more progressive than anyone. But let me give you an example of bipartisanship and what's broken in Congress. Kevin McCarthy, who I disagree with on almost everything, I voted against him on almost every bill, had a bill that would provide veterans with technology training that would give them funds, people who've served our country, to be able to take technology courses to get tech jobs. That was his idea. And his staff emailed 20 members of Congress who came from districts with technology. My staff came to me and said, "Ro, what do you think?" I said, "Of course, I've been talking about getting more people into tech jobs. If someone has served in our armed services, 5.7 million technology jobs, yes, let's do that." He said, "So you're fine with co-sponsoring it?" I said, "I'm fine with co-sponsoring it. You know what? Why don't, given that I represent a district of Silicon Valley, why don't we try to be the lead Democrat co-sponsor on this bill?" So my staff goes to Kevin McCarthy and says, "Ro would like to be the lead Democrat on this." The next day we get an answer. My staff comes to me, "Ro, you're the lead Democrat on the bill." I said, "How did we do that? I'm a freshman." He said, "You're the only Democrat on the bill." So the point is, now I talked to some of my colleagues, there was nothing that they didn't like. It's just there is such a partisan atmosphere. We have got to oppose people on the ideas. I have stood up for free college for all. I'm on Sanders' bill. I'm on for a single payer. But when things are good for the country, we have to do things that are good for the country and try to work across the aisle.
Congressman, this is in regards to health care.
Thank you. I'm a retired nurse. I've worked for about 35 years as a nurse, and I've seen how healthcare has been hurt by the corporate influence and the profiteering that's happening. So that's why I really thank you for supporting the single-payer bill, H.R. 676. It would guarantee easy access to all residents in the United States to health care, to comprehensive health care. So we also appreciate your commitment to oppose the cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, but we also oppose the public option idea because it would continue to include the private health insurance in the scene, and they will simply continue to impose a lot of waste on the system. So these, given that all these proposals mean reduced access to health care, causing premature deaths and bankruptcies of tens of thousands of people, we need to take a positive step and put out the vision that we need a single-payer Medicare for all type system in this country. But a step to that is in the state. We do have a single-payer bill now in the legislature. It's SB 562, and it was just proposed by Senator Ricardo Lara and Senator Tony Atkins, and we would ask for your support for this bill. This is like a stepping stone. If we can create a model, single-payer model in the big state like California, it will inspire the rest of the country to go for HR 676.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your advocacy, and you said you were a retired nurse. I appreciate the nurses' advocacy on this issue. No one has done more for the cause of Medicare for all or single payer than some of the advocacy of nurses around California and the country. So I am obviously for the California single payer bill that Ricardo and others introduced. I think it would be great if we have people running for governor all endorse that bill as part of the 2018 run-up. And my hope is that we can get a consensus of the Democratic caucus to be for Medicare for all. I mean, I am part of a working group with John Conyers that are trying to convince other members of Congress to join Medicare for all. We aren't quite there yet. I mean, we're getting close to 100, but if we can get to 120, 130, then it could become part of the Democratic platform. And we ought to be bold about laying out the vision of what we should be for. So thank you for your advocacy.
Ro, Tom over here, we have a question about net neutrality.
Oh, that's right. Hi, I'm Anna Ravenscroft in Sunnyvale. Here in Silicon Valley, we're all pretty well aware of how important net neutrality is and how much it is an engine of innovation, providing a level playing field for access for everyone. And I want to know what your thoughts are on what you can do about it, and also what can we do to help protect it, as there is the possibility that the FCC may be changing their rules on it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming all the way from Sunnyvale. Obviously, you're passionate about it. I have said publicly and many times, Ajit Pai, the FCC chair, is one of the worst possible picks in government. He is systematically dismantling so many of the basic protections of an open and free internet. Let me get to your question of what we can do and why net neutrality is so important. But let me start by just sharing some basic facts. We in this country invented the internet, right? We built it. Have you ever wondered why we as Americans pay 5 times more than people in Europe, 4 times more in France when we invented the internet? Well, there's a simple answer. There are 4 basic ISP providers that have a monopoly on providing this service. You know, if you look at Time Warner and Verizon, AT&T, Charter, they basically have carved up. Now, Ajit Pai had the audacity. So there's this technical stuff, but we've got a very educated constituency, and it's important that people know what he's doing. He had a decision with Charter which said, Charter, you cannot provide service in an area that Comcast is providing service. He justifies this by saying, well, I want them to provide service to people who don't have it. But really, the rationale is he doesn't want competition. I mean, imagine that. Basically, they want these 4 big companies to divide up the pie of who provides you with internet service. It's monopoly, and it's protection of monopolies. Now, why does this matter? I was in Paintsville, as Gokul mentioned, in eastern Kentucky, and there were people talking about having coal miners and coal miners' kids actually learning software. And some of the people said one of the biggest barriers to that is they don't have broadband access. Now, 40% of rural Americans don't have access to the broadband. My heart broke. I was with a Native American tribe who told me a story of how they were up in Northwest Washington, and the town had to stop using the internet when the high school kids took a test because there was not enough access. Can you imagine that if Mayor Nagy issues an edict saying Newark can't use internet between 3 and 5 because Newark students are testing? I mean, that is the level of disparity in this country. And Ajit Pai is doing absolutely nothing to actually provide universal access to broadband, which, by the way, would help a lot of the states that actually voted for Donald Trump more than even help this district. He's doing nothing to do that. Instead, what he wants to do is get rid of net neutrality. And what would that do with net neutrality? If he gets rid of it, basically it would give these ISP providers the ability to say to a company, we're going to charge you more to have access to the internet. So if you don't play ball with us, and you're a startup, you're a new company, we can price you out. And it's outrageous. It's anti-democratic. It's basically a monopolistic handout to these big telecom companies. So we need to all resist the efforts to undermine net neutrality, both because it's unjust to a lot of people who don't have access and because it would stifle innovation. And what can we do? I give the example. I was talking to Chris Molan, my district director, coming up. We were talking about this front page article in the San Francisco Chronicle about how Trump has devastated the environment. And what we can do, though, is advocacy. And it's your advocacy. Don't underestimate it. It was people's advocacy that blocked health care. It was not my speeches to an empty chamber in Congress that did it. It was people going and talking to their members of Congress, to Republican members of Congress, to sharing their stories. If all of you are out there tweeting on Facebook, following things, commenting, that matters. A citizen's voice has never been more influential. And so I think we just need to get more people mobilized around this issue.
Hi, Congressman. We have a question here on regulations in the workforce.
Thank you. Hi, Representative Khanna. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Melanie from Sunnyvale, and I'm really concerned about the climate in Congress and with the president, that we have to overturn regulations. I mean, these are not, in my mind, regulations, they're protections, and I just wanted to share a story. This is a family story from the late 40s. My grandfather was a carpenter. He built houses. After World War II, the veterans coming back, there was a recession in California. He took a job with a company. It was called Pac Bell. Now it's part of AT&T. He did kind of contract work, day labor work, laying cables in the ground for Pac Bell. He went to work one day. He saw the rope that they were lowering the people down in the hole, and it was frayed. And he said, you know what, it looks like that rope is going to snap. I don't think I should go down there, in the harness until you replace the rope. And they said, you know what, if you don't want to do it, there's a lot of people out of work, someone else will do it. The rope snapped, and that led to, I would say, well, it still has reverberations in our family. He was crippled from that. He didn't die. He was grateful that Pac Bell paid the medical bills, but he had no other compensation. My mom remembers being homeless, living in a neighbor's garage because he couldn't work. Her younger brother had epilepsy, and he had to go to the county hospital, enrolled in a clinical trial. They didn't have regulations for clinical trials back then. He was enrolled in an experimental treatment program to test the drug Dilantin. He died from the side effects of the drug. Okay, that happens in clinical trials, but there were no regulations. I mean, they talk about regulations are killing jobs. Regulations are protections for us, for our families, our parents, our children, and I really would hate to see things go backwards. We can't go back to the 40s. Thank you.
Thank you for such a eloquent statement. See, this is what I mean. People have often more eloquent, powerful testimonials than folks in Congress. I appreciate your sharing your father's story. I often say, not as eloquently as you, but I say every time I fly on an airplane, I'm thankful for regulations. And then the United story happened, and I was really thankful. But the point is, it's regulations that make them go through that checklist. The boring, do you have your seatbelt on and exit rows and all of that? That's all regulated, and it's because that's what makes us safe. It's what makes us civilized society. I remember being young and having visitors. My parents and we had visitors from overseas who were amazed, absolutely amazed that there was someone who was feeling sick on an airplane and the airplane landed, because that was what they were required to do. And they said, wow, in the United States of America, we really value human life, that they would land a plane with one person sick. That wouldn't happen in many other countries. Part of being a civilized, decent society is having regulations that value people. So why are the Republicans talking about getting rid of regulations? Partly they're just not telling the truth. The reality is our country is going through profound economic change. We're going from an industrial age to a digital age. We have artificial intelligence and automation and challenges of what is going to be the jobs that people are going to have. Instead of talking about how we're going to get new industries, instead of talking about how we're going to have people have a middle-class life in a world that's changing, they have a view of let's just blame regulations, blame immigration, blame other countries, and not tell people the truth. Well, that may work for a little bit, but it's not going to work for the long run, because at some point people in these places are going to say, where are the jobs? Where are the jobs? And that's, we've got to have as a country, and then we've got to have a truthful answer, that there is a lot of challenge of creating these jobs, but just gutting regulations isn't going to do it. I appreciate that.
And just to be clear, if you have a question in this section, you should be getting Vanessa's attention. If you're over there, Nandini, if you're here and here, get my attention, okay? So we won't be
They have
waiting.
the staff choose, so I can't self-select my friends. So feel free to ask hard questions.
Okay. But Nandini has a question here.
This question regards immigration.
Hi, my name is Alex Vandenberg. I'm a teacher at Washington High School in Fremont. A lot of my students are undocumented immigrants, and a lot of their families are. And since the election, a lot of them have expressed a lot of fears for both themselves and their families. I want to know, what can you say that can assure them that they'll be safe and that I can tell them when I go back to class tomorrow? And what do you plan to do legislatively to protect my students?
Well, thank you. Thank you for your leadership in talking about that and being a resource to them. I have said that our office is going to be there. Tom Pike, who's our Director of Constituent Services, we've had a number of these instances where we will respond very swiftly if people's families are being split apart, or if there is a move to have folks who are here and are living by the law and are paying taxes and are part of the community, we are not going to tolerate for that type of fare. And so anyone who's a student of yours, you should know they may feel shy about contacting me or contacting Tom, but if you contact us, we will respond right away, as would if they're not in our district, if they're right outside our district, as would anyone in the district. Long term, I think most Americans believe, are sensible enough and thoughtful enough to know that we're not going to deport 11 million people who are undocumented, living in the shadows in this society, that we have to have some path to citizenship for them, or some path to legalization. We had, it was actually George W. Bush who proposed that back in 2004, path to legalization. Everyone thoughtful on both sides know that's the answer. We're unfortunately at a time in our political country where there is this rhetoric of fear, and unfortunately it has consequences. And one of those consequences is young kids don't think it's just politics. They take that very seriously. And while we have this climate affair, I think we need more leaders, not just in Congress, but people like you saying this is a moment that doesn't reflect American values, that our history is one where we have welcomed immigrants. They have become part of this country. And you can maybe tell them the story of one of my colleagues who represents a district in New York who was an undocumented immigrant and now is in the United States Congress. That's much more a part of the American story than what Donald Trump has been talking about.
Ro? We have a question about kind of the broader impacts of the Trump administration.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon. My name is Remy, and I've been in this country for 68 years. I was born here. And so I've been through a lot of different movements, the civil rights movements of the 60s, and particularly, you know, I was alive when Emmett Till was murdered and such. And I'm really afraid for our future. I feel very nervous about it because I see things like H.R. 1313, that if it's passed, employees will have to give over their private health information to employers or be fined. The changes in the overtime laws so that, you know, people don't really get paid for overtime. They can be given time off from work. I feel like we the people has been left out of the Constitution. That's the way I feel. I don't hear anyone talking about, I hear people talking about defense and all these other things, but I don't hear the we the people, the fact that we do belong in the Constitution, the government exists for us. Right now, I feel like we're all being treated like a bunch of chumps, you know? We're making our living and we're trying to get ahead, but we're really making money for, you know, other people. It's not being shared with us in any way. And even the 3% tax on unearned income that, you know, wealthy people are paying, they're hollering like stuck pigs about it. So I wanted to know what can be done to change the narrative so that the aspect of the Constitution from the point of view of we the people, you know, from the ownership of the government, that the government is us. You know, it used to be that people in my community made very good livings working for the government, and now President Trump wants to reduce that by something like 40%. So I'm just very worried. You know, Betsy DeVos in as education secretary. I mean, we're never going to get anywhere near the kind of outcomes that Norway gets in education if we don't, you know, I don't know how to say it, but you know, we're just chipping away at, you know, healthcare over here and this over here. You know, we deserve to have our tax dollars used on us. That's basically what I want to say, and I don't know how. Yeah. So how do you counteract that? Because there's some really sinister things going on.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your very eloquent statement and your example in evoking Emmett Till and the killing and the Martin Luther King and civil rights movement. My parents wouldn't have been allowed to come into this country if it weren't for the civil rights movement, because it led to the 1965 Immigration Reform Act that basically opened up immigration to Asia, and before that we discriminated against many countries. So. You have seen so much of American history and the struggles and what we the people have overcome. I mean, Emmett Till was a African American wrongly accused of rape and was prosecuted just because of his race. And sometimes when you look at some of the police brutality going on today, you wonder how far have we come and where do we have to still go? And so I can see when you look at not just issues of race, but when you look at the issues, as you put it, of disempowerment, where it looks like we the people, it seems so obvious that the corporate pay, CEO pay has increased and worker wages have stagnated? And why is it that people aren't supportive of what the majority wants? You know, there's so many things bad about, or worse about, Trump's America going back to the 50s and 60s for obvious reasons. One thing, though, that was better is CEO pay was about 30 times the worker. Today, it's about 400 times the worker. It's not that suddenly 30 years later we're producing brilliant CEOs that we weren't producing back then. It's that the laws that we have written have so much privileged a return on capital and investment and not a return on work. And those are the laws that we need to change in this. It's not class warfare, it's it's fairness. It's saying that if someone is going and working a hard day, 40-hour week, 50-hour weeks, they ought to earn what they deserve. And the gain shouldn't all just go to the investor class. And by the way, that's not a great way of growing the economy, because the economy will grow more if people have money and they spend that money. That's going to be better for GDP growth. It's going to create more jobs. May not be as good for the stock market, but what we've had is a governing class, just like a CEO class, that has focused so much on the short-term returns. And then they fund these campaigns and they fund the interests, and they have monopolies, and they have people who are appointed into these institutions. And so I can see why people are frustrated. But then I look at the examples, and I'll give 3 examples, not because I know there are people of all supporters, but I look at the example of Bernie Sanders, who got people giving $20 and was at 1% name ID, and now have millions of people. And I look at the example of Hillary Clinton, who, whatever else you think about her, and I supported Bernie Sanders in the primary, but I think, and I will say this, we have got to recognize and treat Hillary Clinton with respect, with some respect, with respect. Here is someone who dedicated her life to public service, whatever, and I disagreed with her on a lot of issues. But she, for the first time, got the more votes as a woman than anyone in American history. We have made progress. That an African American, I would never have dreamed in my lifetime that we would have an African American president who would talk about his grandfather who faced colonialism. So this country has at its core a fundamental decency and a fundamental goodness and a fundamental ability to get what is right, as long as we don't give up, as long as we don't become disillusioned in the face of adversity. And I believe if we keep up the energy that we've seen in the March of Science, in the Women's March, in town halls across this country, that we will have a progressive movement in this country, because these are the right policies, but we just need to keep fighting for those.
Great. Congressman, we have a question here on Social Security.
Thank you. My name is Ashok Desai, and I have a question regarding HR 1902, which is the bill to enhance Social Security that was introduced about 3 weeks back, and you are one of the co-sponsors. Thank you. My question to you is, your leader in Democratic Party in the House, Nancy Pelosi, is not on that list of co-sponsors, so I would like to give you a challenge to get her on board. And the second thing is, there are no Republican congressmen on that list of co-sponsors or sponsors, and that means that it's not going to go anywhere. So I would like you to respond to those questions.
I appreciate it. I joke around with my colleagues when I say I'm the only district in town halls where people can recite the bill numbers and what's in them, So I appreciate that. And look, I have a great district. People vote their district. I have been very fortunate to have a district that has the values that this district does. And so I say it's not an act of political courage for me to be for Medicare for all, or to be for expanding Social Security, or to be for free public college, or to be for people who are undocumented having a path to citizenship, because I'm reflecting the values of my district, of my community. And I love this job for that reason, that this district has not, so far at least, put me in a place where my conscience is in conflict with the values of this place. And they reward me being bold. They reward pushing the envelope. Now, the challenge is, how do we get our values in this district to be values that are embraced by more people in the party? And that's your point. I mean, to get the leader, Pelosi, to be for something, you need many, many people, because she's got the position that she has to look and say, okay, it's not just Roe or Anna Eshoo who are going to be for it. How is it going to play in Ohio, and how is it going to play in Wisconsin, and how many members of colleagues can we get? So my view is the way we can get to that advocacy, I've joined the Progressive Caucus in Congress. It's one of the largest, probably the largest caucus right now. It's chaired by Rahul Grijalva and Keith Ellison. I believe that the Progressive Caucus's agenda will be the future agenda of the Democratic Party. And I am working on, along with others, helping build that case, member of Congress by member of Congress, starting with my freshman class and others. And I think you have seen, to the last point, an energy online and with people who are saying it's not good enough for members of Congress now to go on the floor and give really impassioned, inspiring speeches. They have to have the votes and the substance to match it. And we're going to look at where those votes are. And I think you can hold people accountable, just saying, okay, are they sponsoring HR 676? Where are they on Social Security? What is their voting record? And I think that's how we're going to get to where you want to go, is get more Democrats on this bill. In terms of the Republicans, I mean, I'm not a hyper-partisan. I gave the example of Kevin McCarthy and working across the aisle. But on issues of Social Security and Medicare and health care, they just have a different philosophical view. And we have to defeat that view. There is no compromise on that view.
Hi, my name's Juliet, and I'm from Newark. I'm part of a community of artists, specifically science fiction and fantasy writers, that is actually throughout the United States. And there are many members of my community who are what I would call very vulnerable within the current economic system, because we don't have corporate jobs and we're earning based on our own artistic output. And in our community, we have had a series of recent events that were very troubling, where we dealt with a small group of very noisy bullies who were trying to corrupt our awards system. You may have heard about this. It happened to the Hugo Awards. Anyway, but in many ways, I feel like what happened to our community is a microcosm of what is now happening in the United States, where we have a bully in charge of us now. And what helped most of all in our community was what I would call a feeling of radical inclusion of members of our community, particularly marginalized members of our community, people of color, LGBT people, trans people, and non-binary people. And I believe our community has come through it stronger. I know that in Congress you're going to be under a lot of pressure to make compromises on large-scale things like healthcare and the economy. But I want to make sure, I want to understand how you plan to practice radical inclusion, because the votes that you need are the hearts and the voices of the people. And I want to make sure that people of color and trans people and LGBT people and the people who are disabled and don't have what they need are going to be able to be included in that because, as you were mentioning earlier, the arts are under threat, many things are under threat, and in fact, it's not so much about whether we have the ability to support these programs, it's about where we place our priorities. So I'd like to hear you talk about radical inclusion as a possible strategy, and I'd like to urge you not to cut people off in the name of trying to achieve some kind of ideological purity. I believe in progressivism, but Bernie Sanders' recent support for a representative who is not solid on women's health care has been very troubling to me, and I'd like to see if I could hear your reflections on that topic. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. What eloquent statements today, huh? So I appreciate your sharing your personal story, and I'm glad that you're a writer. I often say, thankfully we have people like you, and not everyone's going and becoming a software engineer, because it's the writers and the artists and the musicians that ultimately help advance human civilization. And it would be a much poorer world if we didn't have that in our society and in our communities. I am part, of course, of the LGBT caucus in Congress and the transgender caucus. Joe Kennedy, very eloquent, he's the grandson of Robert Kennedy from Massachusetts, chairs it. And it deals with many of the issues that you're bringing up. Radical inclusion is a great way of putting it, but radical inclusion in some sense is the American experiment, right? I mean, we were self-consciously, what makes America great is that we were a country that said we're not a country of blood. We're not a country of religion. We're not a country based on gender or sexual identity. We're a country based on a philosophical idea that we will be for equality and liberty. In my entire race for Congress in the last 2 years, not a single person asked me, "Ro, what's your faith?" I would have told them I'm of Hindu faith, but can you imagine not a single person asked me that question in this district? We in this district get radical inclusion because we get that that's part of our founding principle. And we get that radical inclusion allows for creativity and allows for a country to have economic success and innovation. Because when you have the same people looking at something, they may miss something new. This is why the Ming Dynasty in China, for those of you who are students of history, 200 years of exceptionalism, but they were restricting immigration and trade, and they fell. Because countries that are not open to new ideas, that don't have that concept of radical inclusion, don't invent new things, don't grow, and don't prosper. So I think the argument for radical inclusion is both grounded in our Constitution and philosophical principles, and is also what's allowed for our economic success and what we need to continue to do for our economic success. And I will continue to make those arguments. Now, 2 points you addressed, and then we'll go to someone else. One is this candidate. I think you're talking about someone who didn't support women's rights. I mean, I was on the board of Planned Parenthood for 5 years, Marmonte. So obviously I have a very strong belief that when it comes, in my view, to LGBTQ rights, women's rights, the rights of immigrants, there can be no compromise there. Those are values that define who we are as a nation. I will compromise on, okay, you want to do, I believe in a $15 minimum wage, and someone says, will you compromise to get something so we get to $12? Those are conversations we can have. I mean, I've sponsored $15 minimum wage. But I'm not going to say, okay, will you compromise on a women's basic rights, on LGBTQ basic rights, because that's who we are as Americans. And I think that, I have said this in the past, I think it's better to be a morally consistent party and not just think of a swing district, and that means let's compromise our view on LGBTQ rights or women's rights. I don't think that's the right message. I think we ought to run proud of our values. They're the right values, and that's certainly what I will encourage and stand for.
Ro, Question about foreign policy in Syria.
Hi. My main concern right now is actually war. It seems like Republicans and Democrats are like, along with the mainstream media, it seems like everyone's pushing for war right now. Especially, it seems like there's a concerted effort for regime change over in Syria, which can lead us into a hot conflict with Russia. I just want to see where you stand with regime change in Syria. Should we go in, oust Assad, or should we stay out of it? Or I just want to know how you feel about that.
I appreciate it. And I've been very, very outspoken on this. I don't want to plug my own Facebook and Twitter, but if you do go there, you'll see some of my statements and on MSNBC. I've been one of the few Democrats who has been outspoken and critical of the Syrian missile strikes. Not just, and respectfully in disagreement with my own party's leadership on that issue, because it's not just that President Trump should come to Congress. Yes, obviously what he did, he should have come to Congress. It's that this is not a smart strategy to go and intervene. Let's just look at the facts. In 2001, after 9/11, the terrorists were largely on the Pakistan-Afghan border. 15 years later, after continuous intervention after intervention, terrorism has spread to West Africa, to the Middle East. How are we any safer? The reality is with the Assad regime, and they're not they're a morally brutal regime. I mean, Assad's father had the Hama massacre in 1982 that killed thousands of Sunnis, and Syria has had the expulsion of millions of Sunnis. So it's not that I'm an apologist for Assad, but the point is, what should America's response be? My view is that America's response should be to call for an international tribunal to prosecute war crimes, to work with an international community to speak out against the atrocities, but to recognize and be humble enough to know that just intervening unilaterally is not going to make us safer. And you know who we ought to quote? We ought to quote John Quincy Adams. And the reason I say this is because the Republicans have appropriated our founders and people, our early statesmen, as if they are fulfilling their vision. Well, John Quincy Adams has written one of the most eloquent points about American foreign policy that I wish if every member of Congress read, we would be so much better off as a country. He wrote, when he was working for President Monroe, he said, we should not go after monsters overseas to slay. And then he said, well, even though America believes in liberty, we should give voice to those aspirations of liberty and human rights and pray for people and give our expression of solidarity, but we should not intervene with force. And he said the reason we shouldn't intervene with force is because we often will not know whether we are intervening on the side of people who are actually motivated by human rights or whether we're intervening in domestic conflicts. And he concludes saying we will be seen more if we intervene by force as a dictatorial force instead of a voice of liberty. That was John Quincy Adams in the 1800s, prophesying what has been the problem with American foreign policy probably for the last 50 years is we've intervened in the overthrow of Mossadegh in Iran, in the overthrow of Libya, in the overthrow of regimes in Iraq, and made matters worse. And my question is, when are we going to learn that that's not in our national interest and that's not making the world safer? We need the Democratic Party not just to hide behind legalistic interpretations of the Constitution, but to make a progressive case for American foreign policy based on the values of John Quincy Adams, and that's what I plan to do in Congress.
Great. We have a question on gun violence.
Hi. Thank you for allowing me to ask a question, Congressman Khanna. I'm Tony Schellen, and I represent the Tri-City chapter of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. Our goal is, thank you, our goal is to keep people safe from gun violence in our community, whether they're at home, at school, at work, in their place of worship, or anywhere. And the way we try to do this is by keeping guns out of the hands of dangerous persons. A dangerous person might be a convicted felon, someone with extreme mental illness, someone with serious drug or alcohol abuse, or domestic abuser. Unfortunately, Congress has recently and been signed into law a bill that makes it easier for people with extreme mental illness to access weapons. And now there is a bill that has already been passed by the House, and we hope it doesn't get to the Senate, but it's a bill that does the same thing specifically for veterans with extreme mental illness. And we know that there's a very high suicide rate among veterans, so this isn't good for anyone. One of the bills we're very concerned about is something that the NRA refers to as the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Bill. This is H.R. 38, and I imagine you're familiar with it. H.R. 38 would mean that, like California and each state has their own laws about whether or not you can have a concealed carry weapon, which means it's a loaded, hidden weapon. And some states, like California, has the strongest gun laws anywhere, and many states have good laws on this. Some states have very weak laws. You might be able to go online and take a half-an-hour course and then get a concealed weapon. And H.R. 38 would force all states to adhere to the state with the weakest gun laws. And the way they would do this is that, say I lived in Florida and I have a concealed carry permit. I could go to any state, no matter where you got your concealed carry permit, they want that to be valid everywhere. That would weaken our laws. We do not want George Zimmerman type people coming to our state with their concept about guns and being able to have a hidden loaded weapon. So I'm asking you to oppose this law. We think this really takes us backwards. And I don't know if you have already, I have a feeling you've already decided against it, but I would hope that you would, because California has such great laws, and we want to make our own decisions. Our state should be able to have our own laws. We do not want other people coming in here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tony, and thank you for your leadership for many years on this issue. I, of course, will oppose and strongly oppose that legislation, and it's a shame that the current Congress, instead of taking steps forward, like banning assault weapons or having a universal background check or banning magazine clips, things that are such common sense measures, is actually taking steps backwards that are forcing us to play defense so that they don't erode protections that our state has. I will be an advocate for common sense gun safety legislation of the type I advocated, and I certainly will oppose any effort to roll back protections that we have here in California by the type of legislation that's going to be proposed. It's just mind-boggling to me that that is really the driving agenda right now with the Republicans on something like that, given all the problems we have in this country.
Am I next?
Sorry. Okay.
Hi, Ro. Thanks for letting me ask a question. This is my third town hall, and I've enjoyed the interaction all the time.
Great, perfect attendance.
Well, my question is, I think I want to turn the tables a little bit. So far, everybody, I appreciate all the questions, and we are looking for you to help us. So I want to turn the tables a little bit and ask you how we can help. One of the things you have taken an initiative is going to Appalachia and trying to train the coal miners and their kids and trying to establish that empathy. So one thing that I'm still grappling with, I'm sure everybody else is, even after 5 months after election, still unable to believe that our country is so divided, and I still can't believe why the other side voted the way they did. But initiatives like what you have done might help us to understand and show some empathy towards people who are struggling. And being in the Silicon Valley, we should be able to do more, not just rely upon you to carry the beacon, but also help you to succeed in those endeavors. My question is, what can we do to help you in that?
I appreciate that. I appreciate the question. You know, I went to Hal Rogers' district, and for those of you who don't know, Hal Rogers is a Republican representing Eastern Kentucky. And Politico had this graphic up where they said, you know, Roe represents a district that Hillary Clinton carried by 25 points. Hal Rogers represented a district that Trump carried by 25 points. I represent a district that's almost 50% foreign-born. Hal Rogers' district, 99% born in the United States. My district that I have the privilege of representing, almost 50% Asian American, you know, a large population of Latino, significant African American population, and Caucasian, very diverse. Hal Rogers' district, 99% Caucasian. And it was in the heart of coal country. When I was going down there, John Yarmouth, who represents the neighboring district, said, I have two points for you to consider. And I said, what is that, John? He said, one, Barack Obama, when he ran, lost that district to Hillary Clinton 9% to 91%. And he said, you may think that has something to do with race. I said, well, yeah, maybe. I mean, if it's that wide a margin. He said, but I have a second data point for you. And I said, what is that? He said, when Jesse Jackson ran, he carried that district in 1988. And I said, how did he do that? And John Yarmouth said he showed up. He showed up there. I got to tell you, I went there and it was a fascinating experience. I was treated with an extraordinary amount of excitement and respect. People there were excited. They understand what's happening in this economy. This stereotype that somehow coal miners don't get that coal miner jobs are disappearing couldn't be further from the truth. They're proud of obviously having coal mines, but they want their kids to have the same shot that many of us want. They want their kids to have a diversity of opportunity. And you have to understand, one of the people there said to me when John F. Kennedy went to McDowell, West Virginia, which was a bit away from Paintsville, in 1959, he talked about 30% unemployment. And when Bernie Sanders was there in 2016, he talked about 30% unemployment. Now, if I was them, I'd vote everyone out too. 50 years and no economic prospects of jobs. What we have to do as a country is figure out how we're going to create the gains of a transition from an industrial to a digital economy to include everyone. I mean, to include Native Americans, African Americans, women, rural Americans. We're not going to succeed as a nation if some folks have opportunities and half the other country feels left behind. That, to me, is a challenge. And the reality is, it's not an easy challenge. It's not an easy answer. And this is why we've had demagoguery. I mean, you can rail against things. It's so easy to be against things. But the hard part is that we have this extraordinary transition. In the Industrial Revolution, it took 50 years. 50 years till you saw income equality. And I believe that there is a moment where the American people, at least the people I met in Paintsville, want politicians to tell them the truth. They don't want politicians there coming and just promising things that they have heard and they know is not going to be true. They want people to level with them, that the economy is going through transition, that we do need to have new industries and new skills, that they need to figure out what those new skills are going to be. One of the things I said that would be such a great bipartisan initiative, and I disagree with almost everything, of course, this president says, but I said to someone, look, the president made his whole reputation on The Apprentice. Why doesn't he just create 1 million apprenticeship programs around this country? You know, why doesn't he do something that is going to advance our country, advance the people who are being left behind? To me, so what can everyone do? I think it's understanding, in my judgment, most of the people in this room, we are, if not the winners, at least the survivors of this transition. And we have to understand that there are a lot of people who have been left out of it. There's a lot of people in this community who have been left out of it, and a lot of people across the country And I'll tell you, I'll end with this note. Yesterday, or last month, when I was in Sunnyvale doing this town hall, one person came up to me, I don't want to give their name, and they said, Ro, tell the person in Paintsville, when you go there, that I have empathy for them, because I lost my job here in Sunnyvale, right? So we have a transition that we're going through. And whether it's figuring out, having a greater empathy for including people here in our own community who have been excluded, or whether it's figuring out how we do it in the nation, we've got to realize that we have to do better in dealing with this bridge and this divide, and be creative in figuring out how to do that. To me, that is the challenge for our country in the 21st century as we transition in this economy, and we need everyone participating.
Ro, we have a question about federal funding with a local impact, flood control.
Honored Representative, my name is Daro Chu. I'm the very concerned and distressed Milpitas resident here today with regarding a local project with more than $100 million federal funding. And I'm not just here by myself, I'm also here with the more than 150 to 200 petitions against this project, and also with my surrounding neighborhood and the neighborhood in the surrounding area.
What is the project? I missed it.
It's called Berryessa Creek Flood Protection Project. It's a Berryessa Creek Flood Protection.
Yep.
So, so the key thing is we try to urge the water district. So when they proposed this project to get a federal funding in 2011, they proposed one thing, but when they start implementing the project starting last year, they totally doing something different. So we went ahead, we questioned the water district, and this is not right. So they avoid answering the question and avoid complying with the state regulation. So we have no choice but to go to the state agencies to present the concrete evidence we found. This is totally different. And they just say, oh, we totally agree with you, what you found, but there's nothing we can do because this is approve the project. So Water Quality Board urges us to go to the governor's office. Governor's office also agree what we found and saying that water district, Santa Clara Valley Water District, should comply with the CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, to do something, to listen to neighborhood and to go back to the planning stage. By saying, again, nothing we can do, you should go to State Attorney General. So I went to State Attorney General, saying, yeah, you are right, but the agency, the State Quality Board should review this case. But again, the ball being kicked back and forth.
Is this federally funded, you said?
Federally funded. Okay. And with the U.S. Army Corps of
It
Engineering.
seems like you're getting the runaround, but I appreciate your speaking up. Tom Pike, who's giving you the microphone, is my Director of Constituent Services. Why don't you come in on Monday morning with your group instead of in a large forum?
He has my card.
He has your card, and we'll write a letter or talk to the relevant federal agency and see what we can do. But if you meet with Tom and just get the details of which is the agency, we'll figure out where the funding is coming from, and we'll reach out to the other state agencies to see what we can do. Thank you.
Great.
Let's take maybe 3-4 more. Yeah.
So, as you know, this is supposed to go on for an hour of Q&A. Congressman will then wrap up, and then we have to run him off to a couple of quick interviews and then to his next event. So, each of the three staffers gets to do one more. I think that's what we have time for. All right? And so Vanessa started, so Vanessa will start the final round.
Great.
Right.
Congressman, we have a question here on executive orders.
I'd like to know if there's any legal way to get around the executive orders that have been signed. He has bypassed the people. He has bypassed Congress. Is there anything legally we can do or you can do?
Well, we can, and some of the executive orders, of course, are being challenged in court by a lot of civil rights groups. I mean, I think the immigration ban, some of that will not hold up when the courts take a look at it, and already the courts have started striking down some of those areas. The parts that concern me the most are the environmental regulations, and there was a whole article. on it in the Chronicle, and it's concerning because those are areas where, unfortunately, the executive branch has a large latitude, and it's not as clear to me legally that those things are going to be overturned. And so the question is then, what can we do in Congress? Because it's going to take Congress legislative action. Now, fortunately, the good news, to the extent there is some good news, is I have found that there are a large number of freshman Republicans who, believe it or not, actually get that climate change is going to be equally bad for both parties. I mean, it's not going to discriminate against by ideology, and they're younger, but they get the science, and I think some of them have even been open to this idea that George Shultz has proposed about a carbon tax and dividend, that you tax carbon and then give the proceeds of that back to the taxpayers. My hope is that we have to build we have to depoliticize climate change with those new Republicans and get some of them on board, that this is an issue that affects our planet and our country. And I'm hopeful and that's a place I think I can have an impact because a lot of them were in my freshman class. And we've seen there's this new climate action group, which actually has 16 Republicans in it. So I'm optimistic we can do things with the Republicans, some of the Republicans in Congress.
I'm right here. Thank you. I'm Tom Franklin.
Go ahead, ask, and then we'll get. Yeah. Well, it's democracy in action. I'll answer that question, but and then we'll get you. Look, my job is, as I told the comment on Syria, is I come at things obviously from what's first best for our district, then what's best for our country, and then what's best for the world. And my view is what's best for our country is not to be creating more generations of hate across the world. Have you ever wondered, here's what I don't understand. When there is an international humanitarian effort, it has an international face, right? Refugees, taking in refugees or humanitarian aid. Then we want the UN or NATO to do it. But then when they're missiles, it's got an American label. It should be the opposite. It should be the opposite. It should be that we should be leading on humanitarian international efforts and having that be the image of the world and having a more international force if there's ever military action required. Instead, we have had this perpetual almost impulse to take these steps that have led to further and further cycles of violence. And I will make the case, and I will make the case, that this is not only not bad for our national interest, it's not consistent with our founding ideals. It's not consistent with the type of country America aspires to be. A democracy, a beacon to the world, one that respects freedom. That's who we are, and it's unfortunate that that has been compromised. But I am confident that once we all speak out about this, that America's tradition is one of a much more just and compassionate foreign policy. Yes, sir.
I will. I can hold it. Thank you. I can hold it. Thank you. Hi, I'm Tom Franklin. I'm with Indivisible Group in the South Bay. And there's many Indivisible groups who really appreciate you coming and visiting with us as you have in the past. The South Bay Indivisible is our sister group. They have about 100 people. They're not here because they're meeting today, so they send you their regards and their thanks. My group is the South Bay, is Indivisible Resistors of Silicon Valley. And just yesterday, or sorry, Wednesday in our meeting, I was asking a few questions. I found 10 people who had called their congressman more in the last week than all 10 of them had done in their life before Trump. And so this kind of statistic is a very hopeful sign for the future. Where I have concern is that we'll be able to keep the momentum for the next 19 months. We'll be able to keep coming, keep showing up at town halls, keep calling, keep doing whatever it takes. So with that question, I want to ask a sort of a different question that's been asked yet with regard to voter suppression. So what are the most effective ways for us to end voter suppression in districts where, you know, it's really taken a bad toll, and what can be done about it?
I appreciate it. I appreciate your leadership with the indivisible groups. I think it's just, and I'll get to your question on voter suppression, but I do want to compliment you and see the energy that we have seen post Trump's election with the indivisible groups and with so many groups and activism and citizen activism. I think is encouraging and inspiring and does give hope for the future of this country, because I fundamentally believe it makes a difference in shaping people's ideas and views and ultimately allowing us to have progress on these ideas. The voter suppression is a huge, huge issue, because if you look at the gutting of the Supreme Court of the Voting Rights Act and the disenfranchisement of some of the places in this past election, it's a story that's actually not told. You could argue that the disenfranchisement had more to do, more concern almost with the election than even the interference, even though that's a very serious issue. But, the disenfranchisement, the studies are very troubling of some of these places where people were forced to showed ID, were forced to, barriers put in front of them to vote. I mean, we had people march and die for the right to vote in this country, and it seems that we are going backwards. And I think that the only thing that we can do, absent having a better Supreme Court, which we're unfortunately not going to have for the next 4 years, and Gorsuch is not going to overturn the voting rights jurisprudence, is have congressional legislation, which is going to be very difficult. So what can we do? Well, I think it's almost to the point where we need folks to volunteer, to be watching and going to polls, to monitor polls, to during elections, we need lawyers active, much like we had in the civil rights movement, where people are really going to, on a grassroots basis, have to alert the media, have to alert election officials to the disenfranchisement that is taking place. I think it's one of the biggest, I appreciate your raising it, because I think it's one of the biggest stories that the media has missed about this past election, was the systematic disenfranchisement of certain communities. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of the future, our last question is about education.
Hi, so I'm Melanie Sakotis. I go to Newark Memorial, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on the public college. You were saying that you were thinking of, you support free junior college system, state college system, and when I see public college, I see like kind of a devaluation of education, because I've grown up with public school, and I see that there's like a lowering of standards with public school. So I'm afraid that that's what's going to happen to our college systems. With California having some of the best colleges, I'm afraid that they'll lose a lot of their high standards with the publication or the free college ideas.
I appreciate that perspective. One, I think that, look, California college, I don't know if there are folks, I don't want to put people on the spot who are old enough, but their college in this state didn't cost that much. There are people who went to Berkeley and UC Davis and others at $500 a year or $1,000 a year, and they were great schools back then. So I don't think that making college affordable is necessarily going to mean a decline in the quality. The bill that Sanders has proposed was actually a compromise with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, where it said that people who make under $125,000 a year should be able to go to a public college without having to pay tuition. People making over that would still have to pay, or you could have to pay it back after you get a job. And I think providing that access to college or some form of higher education is absolutely necessary. Just like at one point in our country's history, we had a debate about whether high school should be free or not. We know that the new economy is going to require some form of post-high school education, whether it's apprenticeships, whether it's vocational education, whether it's college, and we've got to make that affordable and within reach. I believe the reason that we don't have enough quality in certain areas, even of public education, is often an issue of funding. I mean, if we were to have more funding in the right type of schools, pay teachers more, invest in education like we used to before Prop 13 in this state, we would see a lot better return on education. So I'm not sure that providing more affordability will decrease the standard, and I think it's really necessary. But I appreciate the perspective and certainly appreciate your being here. All right, I think we're going to wrap up. Let me say we're going to have another town hall on May 7th in Santa Clara. And so we'll send out an email. So for those of folks who didn't get to ask their question, maybe you can let Tom or Chris know, and if you're going to come to the next town hall, we can maybe give you the first question there. And I really appreciate everyone taking the time to be here. Like I said, I find these very valuable in my own representation of this area, and I look forward to doing them frequently, and I'm always would be delighted if any of you come to DC to visit. It's worth a trip. We'll get a tour and everything, so hopefully at some point some of you will come to visit. Let me finally say, though, that I think it's going to be a tough week in Congress with all the nonsense that will be introduced. But I believe, as the gentleman pointed out, with the calls to Congress and the activism and the sustained energy, that over the long run, our democratic institutions are so strong and our history is so strong that the people's voices do prevail. And the more we are engaged, the better chance we have of preventing the damage before our voices do prevail. So thank you.
All right. And thank all of you for being so cooperative. And for those of you who let the staffers hold the mic, thank you very much. We have a couple of interviews he has to do for reporters that are on deadline. So we're going to do that right away. And then we'll hustle him off to his event, but you might be able to say hello. Hey, you're very welcome. All right.